Hey guys, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a first impressions video for you. And today we're taking a look at a new cold steel for this year, which is 2020. So if you're watching this far in the future, that kind of gives you a bit of context here. This is the SR1 Lite in Tanto. We've previously had the standard version of the SR1, which is G10 and S35VN, I believe. Although I think I had the drop point or the clip, I guess it was a clip point that we had on the channel previously. I've said this before, and I would maintain that you know, of all of the really hard use, like insanely overbuilt folders that are out there, the SR1 is probably the most quintessential one. Like, it's the hardest of hard use. Now, it definitely makes some sacrifices that mean it may not be practical in all situations, but in terms of a knife you can just beat on, it's a pretty darn good option. So let's get back into, well, let's get the actual knife here instead of just looking at the box. Okay, so there we go. And let's give a quick rundown on the specs first of all. So overall, this knife is almost 9.5 inches, 9 and 7/16. The blade is almost 4 inches, so 3 and 15/16. 5.5 inches on the handle. All right, now the blade thickness is not something I always share with you guys, but this is about 3/16 thick. So huge thick blade stock. Just to show you, all right, here is a Recon 1, and I would call all the Recon 1's blade stock fairly standard in terms of thickness. This isn't wanting to focus very well. There we go. But you can see it's much thicker. Okay, so this is a very thick blade. It's ATR13 MOV steel. I guess we'll get to that in a minute when we speak to the materials. First off, let's just say big thick blade, 4 1/8 grip area, so quite a big grip area, and this weighs in at 6.7 ounces, which is lighter, although not substantially lighter than the 7.2 inches of the, I guess, standard version. This is called the Lite, and I guess it's sort of a little bit lighter by like by a few fractions of an ounce. It is lighter, so I guess it kind of deserves that name. Okay, so let's next hit on the features and materials. So beginning here, we have this massive blade. It is ACR13 MOV steel, which is not my favorite steel. I would have loved to have seen this done in AUS 10, especially as Cold Steel does it. They have done a really nice job with that. That said, I don't think ACR13 MOV is the end of the world, especially for a knife like this. Okay, this is not the knife you're going to be slicing tomatoes with and doing your fine cutting tasks with anyway, because it's just not designed for that. So does it need to have crazy good edge retention? Nah, not really. And if you want that really good edge retention, you can always go up, you know, start saving your money and get the standard version, which is going to have S35VN. Okay, so ATR13 MOV, very thick. Tanto grind. There's also I believe it's a drop point. I guess it might be a clip point. I got confused about that a few minutes ago as well when I talked about the standard version that I had before. Moving on, great big thick, fairly comfortable thumb studs. Of course, in keeping with the size of the blade stock, the Triad Lock here is massively huge. Okay, now I will say this, maybe it's something about the way these larger Triad Locks work, but this is a pretty nice Triad Lock. It's not as smooth as the 8010, but you can see I can flick this open a little easier. It's definitely a pretty well implemented Triad Lock, and I can't complain. You know, with a couple of models, the ones that stand out are like the Code 4, the American Lawman, in some cases the Ultimate Hunter. That Triad Lock can be pretty stiff. This is not so bad, or at least it's maybe not so noticeable because it's a little thicker, so probably easier to push on. The handle itself is Cold Steel's Gryvex, which is, you know, like a reinforced plastic. Similar to like an FRN or a GRN. I did want to point out one thing. You can see here that it's not full liners. So let's see if I can show you back here as well. So as you can see, back at the back of the blade, right back here, you can see the liners are there, but they only use the steel liners where they're needed to make the lock work. All right, very heavily textured Gryvex. And I will say, like I did way back when we looked at the Voyager series, Cold Steel's Gryvex is actually pretty decent. Like, I can't really pick on them that bad because they do a pretty stinking good job. Would I prefer it was G10? Sure, I would. But again, you know, if you want a G10, you can go ahead and upgrade to the standard version of this knife. It does have a movable clip. Like most Cold Steel clips, it's a little tough to get in and out of pocket initially. I'll let you know how that goes over time. Most of my Cold Steels have kind of worn in and become a little bit easier over time, or I've taken, you know, a pry tool and just gently pried up on them just a little bit. So, you know, now all the Cold Steels I have are pretty comfortable. By the way, be careful doing that. You hear some stories from time to time about people breaking them. And that can happen if you get just a little too aggressive. I don't normally do a lot of comparisons when it comes to first impressions videos, but I thought I'd quickly throw in just an 80-10, especially for thickness. Okay, we've talked about how thick and overbuilt the 80-10 is, and you can see this is considerably more so. Sorry about that, guys. Dropped the other knife, but let's grab a Recon 1 as well. So again, Recon 1, I'm going to keep the Recon 1 in here for my final thoughts because I think it's kind of a helpful comparison here for a second. So what are my overall impressions on this, my initial thoughts as I sort of get to, you know, first open it and check it out and experience it? This is what I would consider an occasional carry type of knife, okay? This is not what I want in my pocket for a lot of the things that I want to do with my knife. However, there are certain circumstances where I could see wanting it. And so where I would call the Recon 1 a more EDCable knife because it's got a blade that can do anything that you would want to do with a knife and do it fairly well. The SR1 is definitely not that, okay? This is not going to do all the cutting tasks that you have as well as it could. And so, you know, you're going to want to carry this when perhaps you know with a fair degree of certainty that you're not going to be cutting up, I don't know, a bunch of cardboard. You're not going to be doing any kind of food prep, right? Where the cutting tasks you have are going to be, you know, could you open packages with this? Sure, you could. Could you cut cardboard with it? Yes. I wouldn't want to cut a ton of it. Now the handle is comfortable. So even though you'd have to push harder, at least you have a more comfortable handle to push on. That's pretty nice. But those are some of the considerations that I think you should make before buying this. The other thing is I really have to say that I'm excited to see this in a budget version. Okay, that really makes me happy because whenever I get a knife that I feel like is sort of specialty use, that essentially means I'm going to have more than one knife, right? Like I wouldn't recommend anyone go out and buy this as your only folding knife that you're going to carry. There are much better options that are more balanced. Okay, this is the knife you carry when you need something that you're really going to pound on and you want to be fairly confident that you're not going to break it. Well, that's a pretty rare circumstance for me and my uses, and likely a pretty rare circumstance for most of you as well. But having this, I can, you know, having the price point of like 59 bucks, this is something I can afford to buy and have in my collection for those times when I want something that's overbuilt and crazy and, you know, insane. But then most of the time I can rely on something like this. Okay, so there you go, guys. That's my initial thoughts. Make sure you use those discount codes down below. This did come from White Mountain Knives, and I believe they still have a few in stock. So go over there, use my discount code, and save yourself a little bit of money on this one. Thanks a lot for watching. Thanks a lot for using those discount codes. It does help the channel. We'll talk to you soon.